can go to gramener.com/datacomics and you'll see the examples that are there on my screen. Now, for some reason, my chat, here's the chat. I'll put this on to everyone. So, here are a couple of analyses that are expressed using comic characters. This is the presidential debate between Trump and Biden at Nashville, where each of these statements, when they are made by someone, so Trump starts with, "Hi, how are you doing?" And then the moderator has a slightly longer panel, and so on. In each one of these, what happens here is it's firstly color coded based on who says something, and we can dive into what they're saying. But also the expressions of the characters are a function of the sentiment of what is being said. A positive sentiment versus a negative sentiment. Are they saying something that is strongly positive, strongly negative? It's also something that you can search for using specific keywords. So let's say we search for, when are they talking about tax? This is where there is a debate around tax. But what's happening here is that the character is being used to convey the emotion of what is happening here. Another example is social distancing. And this is a slightly longer strip, but I'm not going to go into the details of this. The crux of it is that in Manhattan, there were several calls that people would send in complaining about social distancing. And it's in fact the number 2 complaint that was there in New York City, with the exception of loud music, which was the number 1 complaint. How does this break up by borough? So let's take Brooklyn. That's the distribution in Brooklyn. So Bronx is more worried about loud music. Let's click on Bronx. And out here, you'll see that social distancing is the orange one, and other complaints, which among other things include loud music, which is the number 1, is actually higher. Staten Island, social distancing was the number 1 complaint. Queens, social distancing was the number 1 complaint. And in each of these cases, what's happening is that this text explains what's happening here. 82 out of the 365 days, social distancing was the number 1 complaint in Brooklyn. In 91 out of 365 days, social distancing was the number 1 complaint in Queens. And the character's emotion is a function of how severe the statement is. So this is a simple case where we have data that is being communicated, but it's not just the chart that is communicating the data. It is also text that is communicating what needs to be read, because not everyone can infer something from a chart on either side. But more importantly, this is one way of combining what Devrani was talking about, which is how do we convey emotion, and human faces are one of the simplest ways of conveying emotion. Let's talk about one other thing, which is what other kinds of analysis can one do? And now we are getting into the realm of something that's not traditional, but quite bizarre. We took the Mahabharata and said, let's take each of the 18 chapters in the Mahabharata. They are further broken up into individual sections. So this, for example, is the translation of one of those sections. And it's not a very long section. This is a tiny little section, and therefore it's represented. I maybe got the section numbers wrong or something. But each of these sections represents, the width of these boxes represent the number of words in each section. Then we said, let's look at the top 60 characters in the Mahabharata and see where they are mentioned. So Yudhishthira, for example, is mentioned all over the place. He's marked in blue. This shows that in this section, he appears towards the beginning and then a little bit towards the middle, not so much towards the end. In this section, he's not mentioned at all, nor here, nor here, nor here. But overall, he's there right across the epic. Let's take Arjuna. Again, in lots of places, but you'll find that there are large swaths of the epic where he's not mentioned at all. So he's not the real hero of the Mahabharata, even though he's pretty heroic. We can take peripheral characters, like let's say Nala, and we'll find that Nala is mentioned out here in a small strip and barely anywhere else. So without reading the epic, you can conclude that there is a short story about Nala. He's one of the side characters who comes in just at this point and vanishes. If you click on Damayanti, now you'll notice that Damayanti is appearing at exactly the same spots that Nala is appearing. So again, without reading the epic, you can conclude that Nala and Damayanti are more closely connected because they're part of the same short story than, let's say, Nala and Subhadra, who are coming in very different spots. Now, what that means is that for any two characters, we can kind of get a distance between those characters and start exploring the relationship by those distances. So if we take the top 30 characters, this is how strongly they are connected. Yudhishthira is fairly tightly connected with most of the people. Obviously, he's the hero of the epic. But if you take Vyasa, for example, he's not talking to too many people. He's talking to Narada, he's talking to Vaishampayana and Dhritarashtra. Gandhari is just talking to Vidura, Dhritarashtra and Kunti. No one else. Now, with this, we can ask questions like, for example, who is Draupadi's favorite Pandava? So let's see. Draupadi is pretty close to Sahadeva, pretty close to Nakula, pretty close to Bhima, pretty close to Yudhishthira. But interestingly, the Pandava she's furthest away from is Arjuna, which is surprising because didn't she like Arjuna a lot? So initially this puzzled us. But then we spoke with a few people, one of whom clarified. See, the epic talks about Draupadi liking Arjuna. There is no mention in the epic of Arjuna liking Draupadi. In fact, if anything, there is a Marathi play, which in turn is based on a Bengali play, on how Draupadi felt completely ignored by Arjuna. And of the Pandavas, he was the one she felt was most distant from him. And what you're discovering, they said, was simply something that is already there in the epic. But because you seem to have done the analysis through data, it's coming out, even though it's not very well known. A very unconventional analysis, but the point is, it's not about what technique we use to analyze. It's about how we explore and what use we are putting data to that matters sometimes. And there's some weird stuff that can come out of data analysis.